Our case today is about the most notorious serial killer in all of Asia. He turned a sentence of homicide in India into a life of leisure while evading the death sentence in many countries. He was a drug dealer, a jewel thief, a conman, and a serial killer. He preyed upon unsuspecting tourists who traveled to Asia from the West. Above all, he turned his life of adventure into money by becoming a media celebrity. His antisocial personality disorder ignored the rights and feelings of many individuals, which is how he was able to kill without a conscience. With so many nicknames given to him, his most infamous nickname was the Serpent, for his cunning deception and evasion. This is the dark and true story of Charles Sobhraj. Charles was born as Hachand Bhawani Gurmukh Sobhraj on April 6, 1944. He was born in Saigon, Vietnam to an Indian merchant and a Vietnamese peasant girl. His father ended up leaving their family. During this time, Vietnam was a group of French colonial territories located in Southeast Asia. It was called French Indochina, until its demise in 1954. Charles was stateless till his mother met another man who adopted Charles. His name was Alphonse Dureau, a French lieutenant stationed in French Indochina. The land of Indochina was in turmoil with French colonial troops fighting against communist rebels. In his young age, he witnessed countless acts of violence before he was taken to France. Since he had been the son of another man, he was neglected in favor of the couple's later children. He continued to move back and forth between Indochina and France. While in France, he attended a Catholic boarding school in Paris where he soon became the butt of racial jokes and insults. This may have been why he felt like he didn't belong anywhere, especially as a mixed minority. Even as a teenager, he committed petty crimes. In 1963, he received his first jail sentence for committing burglary. He was imprisoned at the Poissy prison near Paris. It was built in the 16th century as a convent and turned into a prison after the French Revolution. Prisoners were forbidden from keeping books in their cells, however Charles was the exception. Using his manipulative abilities, he was able to convince the prison guards to do his bidding. During this time, he met Félix Descone, a wealthy young man and prison volunteer. Félix came to the prison every week to help prisoners with letters, resolve simple legal issues and provide companionship. However, Charles manipulated Félix's good nature to help himself. Félix would provide reading material, emotional stability and encouragement for Charles as he stayed in Poissy. After being paroled, he moved in with Félix and spent his time moving around the high society of Paris, striking up friendships with respectable families. However, he had not reformed. He was still operating within the criminal underworld. Charles eventually met a young Parisian woman from a conservative family. Her name was Chantal Compagnon, and she had met Charles at a party. She became smitten with him, after he told her about his adventures in Asia and about his fictitious, wealthy family in Saigon. Despite his charms, Chantal's traditional French Catholic father was not going to allow his daughter to marry a mixed individual such as Charles, despite how rich his parents were in Vietnam. Despite his wishes, Charles proposed to her, asking for her hand in marriage. But he was arrested later that day when police caught him for driving a stolen car. He was sentenced to 8 months in prison. Nevertheless, Chantal did not leave him. She supported him throughout his sentence. Since Charles had built up a nice nest egg from his series of scams, he was able to convince Chantal's parents to marry his daughter. Which is why upon his release, Charles married Chantal in a simple civil ceremony attended by representatives of both families. In 1970, Charles and the pregnant Chantal left France for Asia to escape an arrest by French police. They had narrowed down Charles's crimes of passing bad checks and burglary in multiple wealthy homes. On their journey throughout Eastern Europe, Charles and Chantal robbed many tourists who they befriended. They arrived in Mumbai, India later that year and gave birth to a girl by the name of Usha. However, Charles's criminal activities had only escalated in India. He ran a stolen car brokerage operation by obtaining hard-to-find American and European automobiles for homesick Frenchmen and wealthy Indians. He also had become addicted to gambling. Due to this bad habit, he lost a lot of money at the casino, prompting him to liquidate all of his assets. However, this was still not enough to appease the debt collectors, so he hatched a plan to obtain enough money to pay off all of his debts. In 1973, Charles robbed a jewelry store at the five-star Ashoka Hotel. He tried drilling into the shop by booking a room directly overhead. However, it wasn't as easy as it looked, since the drilling did not work. So he invited the store owner into his room, obtained the keys to the store by pointing a gun at him, and emptied all of the cases filled with jewelry. While he was trying to flee the police via Delhi airport, he was forced to abandon all of his loot at the customs. He returned to Mumbai empty-handed. However, he was caught by police when he was pulled over and, based on eyewitness identification, arrested for the attempted robbery at the hotel. Despite being jailed, Charles was able to easily escape with Chantal's help by faking an appendicitis. However, he was easily captured shortly after. With the help of his father, he was let go on bail, only to flee to Kabul, Afghanistan. On the Hippie Trail, they began robbing tourists to keep afloat. The Hippie Trail is a route taken by members of the hippie subculture, a youth movement which began in the US and extended to the rest of the world. It enabled Westerners to travel from Europe to South Asia during the mid-1950s till the late 1970s. Many who traveled this route, traveled cheaply and stayed for extended periods away from home. There would be many hotels, restaurants and cafes designated for Westerners who networked with each other as they traveled from the east to the west. The trail would end in the late 1970s after the Iranian Revolution and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan to Western travelers. However, till then, Charles would exploit these tourists by befriending them and scamming them out of their money, passports and identification documents. It is said that Charles had an intense hatred for hippies since most of them were spoiled rich white kids who left their good wealth in their respective countries to search for spiritual awakening. This was one of many reasons which validated his crimes. He was then caught and jailed for auto theft in Afghanistan, along with Chantal. However, Chantal was let go early. But this was the last straw for her since she was tired of running from the law. She left Charles behind and returned to France, vowing never to see him again. Despite this, Charles managed to escape the same way he had in India, by faking an illness and drugging the hospital guard. It is said that in September 1972, Charles killed for the first time. His first known murder victim was a Pakistani chauffeur by the name of Habib, who was hired to drive him and a female companion from Rawalpindi to Peshawar, Pakistan. He passed through various countries in Eastern Europe and the Middle East. This is when he met his younger half-brother, Andrei, in Istanbul, Turkey. Charles and his brother became partners in crime, participating in many criminal activities in both Turkey and Greece. The duo would eventually be arrested in Greece. To escape jail, Charles planned an identity switch hoax. Since Charles was the wanted man, he wanted to switch roles with his brother. This way, he would be able to walk out of prison for a lesser crime. His brother could later claim that they let the wrong person go. However, this did not go as planned. Charles had managed to escape while his brother was left behind. When André told the warden that he was the real André Duro, this angered the Greeks. Despite Turkey and Greece being historic enemies, the Greeks handed André over to the Turkish police. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison. While Charles's only known murder victim was a driver from Pakistan, the number of people he would soon start killing will grow drastically. He met a Canadian woman by the name of Marie-André Leclerc in Thailand while she was sightseeing. He introduced himself to her as a gem salesman. It was the same MO he had been using to impress and befriend tourists whom he defrauded. However, Marie was the exception, as she was someone looking for adventure. So Charles managed to convince her to return to Bangkok after her vacation ended and join him in his adventure. She became dominated by Charles, becoming his most devoted follower. She would turn a blind eye to most of his crimes and his philandering with local women. Her love for Charles was pathological. During his scams, he would introduce Marie to everyone else as his wife. During their first crime, they skillfully won over an Australian couple while they were vacationing in Thailand. Charles and Marie served the Aussies with coconut milk laced with powerful sedatives. After they had fallen asleep, Charles ransacked their hotel room, stealing thousands of dollars in money, passports, wedding rings and plane tickets. This was just the beginning. He gathered followers by gaining their loyalty through scams. In one instance, he would recover the passports of 2 French policemen as they were vacationing in Thailand. Their names were Yannick and Jacques. But this was a lie since Charles had initially stolen the passports from them. In another scheme, he would provide shelter for a Frenchman by the name of Dominique Ranello, who was suffering from dysentery. However, the cause of Dominique's illness was caused by Charles, as he was the one who poisoned him. Charles graciously offered the use of his home as Dominique recovered. Once it was made clear that Dominique was in Charles's debt, the boy accepted his position and the recovery accelerated. Charles also started working alongside an Indian criminal by the name of Ajay Chowdhury. Ajay would soon become Charles's lieutenant as he would assist Charles in many of his crimes. It was in 1975, when Charles and Ajay would commit a murder together, starting this serial killing frenzy. Most of their victims spent most of their time with Ajay and Charles before their deaths. According to investigators, Charles and Ajay would ask them to join their clan to commit more crimes, either to make money or steal passports. Charles denies killing them, citing that most of their deaths were accidental drug overdoses. However, investigators would say that the victims were killed when they threatened to expose Charles. Their first known victim was a young American woman from Seattle by the name of Teresa Knowlton, who had come east to find herself through meditation and immersion into a Buddhist lifestyle. She was found drowned in the tidal pool in the Gulf of Thailand, wearing a flowered bikini. While at the time, it was believed that she drowned from a swimming accident, forensic evidence which was later released, proved that her drowning was caused by Ajay and Charles. The next victim was a nomadic Turkish man, Vitaly Hakim, who had come east looking for life's meaning. He had joined the entourage and stayed with them for several days. However, Charles had told his clan that Vitaly had opted to stay with his other friends in a nearby resort town on the Gulf of Thailand. This confused Yannick and Jacques since Vitaly had left his clothes in his apartment and turned over his passport and traveler's checks to Charles for safekeeping. Several days later, a male body would be found burned on the road to Pattaya Resort, where Charles and his clan were staying. The body had shown several signs of being beaten. He had also been alive when gasoline was doused and set ablaze. Charles's next victims were 2 Dutch students, Henk Beetanja, aged 29, and his fiancée, Cornelia Hemker, aged 25. Charles identified as Alain Gauthier, a gem dealer to the couple when they met in Hong Kong. They were invited to Bangkok to live with them in a luxurious villa. Like most of his victims, Charles had poisoned them. He then tried to nurture them back to health in his apartment instead of sending them to the hospital. Charles had also locked up their valuables in his safe, along with their passports. However, as the 2 students were recovering, Vitaly's French girlfriend, Charmaine Caru, had come to investigate her boyfriend's disappearance. Fearing being exposed, both Charles and Ajay hustled Henk and Cornelia out. Their bodies were found strangled and burned on December 16, 1975. Cornelia was found, wearing a similar styled swimsuit as Teresa. Since many of his victims were found, wearing only a bathing suit, he would also earn the nickname the Bikini Killer. Using their passports, Charles and Marie had entered Nepal. Between December 21 and the 22nd of 1975, they met and murdered a couple. The couple was a Canadian man by the name of Laurent Carrière, who was 26 years old, and an American woman by the name of Connie Bronzich, who was 29 years old. Laurent was hoping to climb Mount Everest and Connie was looking for spiritual meaning. Charles and Marie would later return to Thailand using their Laurent and Connie's passports even before their bodies were found in a field, slashed with a knife and burned. On the run from Nepalese police, they had crossed the border into India where they made their way to Calcutta. Charles's next victim was an Israeli scholar by the name of Avoni Jacob, who had been found drugged and strangled. His passport, and his traveler's checks amounting to $300 were missing from his belongings. Charles used it to travel to Singapore, then India with Marie and Ajay before returning back to Bangkok in March of 1976. By the time they returned, Charles discovered that his 3 French companions, Dominique, Yannick and Jacques, were missing. They had started to suspect Charles of being a serial murderer during his trip to Nepal. They broke into his office and found dozens of passports and identity papers belonging to other tourists. His former companions fled for Paris after notifying local authorities. Thai authorities brought the trio in for questioning once they came back to Bangkok. While the trio were interrogated for the murders, Thai police let them go due to the fear of negative publicity which could have harmed the nation's tourist industry. However, some suspect that Charles had bribed the police to look the other way while Charles and his cohorts fled the country once more. However, a Dutch diplomat by the name of Herman Nippenberg, who was working for the Dutch embassy in Thailand, and his wife, Angela Kane, were investigating the murders of Hank and Cornelia. With the help of Nadine and Remy Gires, who were Charles's neighbors in Bangkok, Thailand, Herman was able to slowly gather evidence against Charles. He obtained permission from the Thai police to search Charles's apartment, a month after Charles had left the country with Marie and Ajay. When Charles's apartment was searched, Herman found evidence, including victims' documents, their passports, syringes and poisons. Charles had overestimated his own intelligence and underestimated the law enforcement agencies in the East. News had broken about a serial killer in Thailand who was killing tourists in the spring of 1976. Since tourism was vital for Thailand, the Thais had to find Charles or millions would be lost if people stopped coming into the country. Calls for action were coming in from every embassy. This is why in 1976, Charles became one of Interpol's most wanted along with Marie. The trio landed in Malaysia where Ajay was sent to steal gems. Ajay was last seen delivering gems to Charles. However, after this incident he was never to be seen again. Charles had met Marie at the airport without Ajay by his side. It is unknown whether Ajay survived or was killed by Charles. Charles had left Malaysia to continue as gem dealers alongside Marie in Geneva, Switzerland. While a source claimed to have seen Ajay in West Germany, there isn't any evidence which backs this claim. He came back to Mumbai, India, with 2 more Western women. Barbara Smith hailed from Britain while Mary Ellen Ether was French. They assisted Charles and Marie with the drugging and robbing of tourists. However, Charles's next victim would not be so lucky. His name was Jean-Luc Solomon, a Frenchman, who was supposed to be incapacitated by the poison administered to him during the robbery. However, he died by falling into unconsciousness, never to awake again. In July 1976 in New Delhi, Charles and his clan of women tricked a group of French postgraduate students into accepting them as tour guides. Charles tricked them into taking poison pills, which he told were anti-dysentery medicine. This was so he could rob them of their passports. However, the pills took effect faster than expected. 3 of the students realized what Charles had done. Only the students who had taken the medication fell into unconsciousness. The students overpowered him and contacted the police, leading to his capture. During the interrogation, his new accomplices, Barbara and Mary Ellen, buckled under the pressure and confessed to the crimes. Thailand, Nepal, Greece, Afghanistan and Turkey all wanted to charge Charles for the crimes he had committed. France wanted nothing to do with him. Charles was charged with the culpable homicide not amounting to murder and multiple charges of drugging and robbing. All 4 were sent to Tihar jail in New Delhi to await trial. Since the judicial system was clogged with political prisoners and criminals alike, it took nearly 2 years before their trial began. During the mid-1970s, Tihar jail was unlike any jail in the world. The inmates would have to buy their food. If they couldn't afford to, they would starve. Rats and insects would run brazenly since convicts were too weak to put up a fight. There were also inmates who had been forgotten and were slowly going insane in the prison. Due to the horrible nature of Tihar jail, Barbara and Mary Ellen tried to commit suicide, even before the trial had begun. Charles, however, was able to live comfortably. He had entered the jail with precious gems concealed in his body, which meant he could be a celebrity within the jail walls by bribing the guards and other prisoners. When the trial finally did happen, it was a spectacle. Charles hired and fired lawyers at will. He brought his brother, Andrei, to assist him in the trial after he was recently paroled in Turkey. He also went on a hunger strike. However, in the end he was sentenced to 12 years in prison for the death of Jean-Luc. Marie was also found guilty, but was extradited to Canada where she developed ovarian cancer. She was still claiming innocence and was loyal to Charles till her death in April 1984, when she was 38 years old. During his sentence, Charles embraced a bribery system of prison guards at Tihar, which had reached outrageous levels. Inside the jail, he led a luxurious life with television, gourmet food, and befriended both guards and prisoners. He gave interviews to countless Western authors and journalists. When Charles's sentence was due to end, the 20-year-old Thai arrest against him was still valid, making it possible for him to be extradited to Thailand, where he would face the death sentence and be executed for his crimes. So on March 16, 1986, during his 10th year in prison, Charles threw a party for the guards and fellow inmates, during which time, he drugged everyone with sleeping pills and walked out of prison. He was later apprehended in Goa, India, and his prison sentence extended by another 10 years. However, all of this was as he planned. He wanted the sentence in India to be extended, so that when the statute of limitations expired, he would no longer be wanted in Thailand. In February 1997, the 52-year-old Charles Sobhraj was released with most warrants. Evidence and witnesses against him were long lost. Without any country willing to extradite him, he returned to France, to live out the rest of his days. Or so he hoped. After his release, Charles retired to a comfortable life in suburban Paris. He hired a publicity agent and charged large amounts of money for interviews and photographs. It was said that he charged close to over $15 million US for the rights of a movie based on his life. During his retirement in France, Charles would return to Nepal, despite knowing it was one of the few countries he could still be arrested in. Many say it must have been his overconfidence which enabled him to return, since a normal person would not have come back. On September 1, 2003, Charles was spotted by a journalist working for the Himalayan Times in a casino in Kathmandu. According to the newspaper, Charles had come to Nepal to set up a mineral water business. Once Nepal police saw the news report, they raided the casino and arrested Charles, who was unaware of the situation and was still gambling. The Nepal police reopened the double murder case from 1975. On August 20, 2004, Charles was sentenced to life imprisonment by the Kathmandu District Court for the murders of Connie Bronzich and Laurent Carrière. The evidence that was used against Charles was gathered by the Dutch diplomat Herman Nippenberg, who had made photocopies of everything he gathered in his initial investigation. Despite numerous appeals, on July 30, 2010, the Supreme Court upheld the verdict of life sentence for the murder of Connie Bronzich and another year for entering Nepal illegally. On September 18, 2014, Charles was convicted for the murder of Canadian tourist Laurent Carrière. In 2018, Charles was in critical condition and had been operated on several times. He received numerous open-heart surgeries. As of currently, he is 77 years old and remains in Nepalese prison, with poor health. It is said that Charles may have killed between 12 to 20 people, but those numbers have not been verified as he may have committed more murders which are still not known. As of right now, he isn't allowed any unsupervised visits and cannot be sent to the prison hospital under any circumstances. Since he has used that opportunity to fake an illness, drug the doctor and escape in the past from multiple prisons. Therefore, doctors now go to his cell to examine him. When Charles was interviewed by the Australian journalist, Richard Neville, Charles had told him, "If first play back a murder, it will be to see what I have learned from the method. I won't even notice the body." This is one of the reasons why Charles remains as one of the most prolific serial killers in Asia. For him, killing was never an emotional one but a means to survive. Thanks for tuning in. Please like and share this video. Subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell for updates on new videos. Please also join my Patreon and help support this channel. Thanks. Hope to see you guys next time.